He is running for city council, and he is running citywide. Made the announcement official last week after months of, discussion about him running. Not a big surprise when Bobby Tubielli made that announcement. Maybe the surprise was he's not running in his downtown district, but he's running citywide. Bobby Tubielli is joining us here in the studios. Good morning, Bobby. How are you, sir?
Hey, Teddy. Good morning, Alex. Good morning, and good morning, listeners.
I normally start with, introduce yourself and tell everybody why you're running. A lot of people know you. You enter the race with name recognition. I'm still going to give you a chance to introduce yourself and tell us why you're running.
Sure.
But I have to get your reaction to the news that you may be sitting on a candidate.
A fellow Bob?
Thank God they put the last names in big letters and not the first names. Your reaction to the news that was just reported to us from today's Facebook Live broadcast.
What a time to be alive. That's all I got to say.
That's very political. They're very good. Why are you running for city council this year? It's been rumored for a while. You finally pulled the trigger, made it official.
Right.
What inspired you to run, Bob?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about me, but I think firstly I want to just thank all the people that I've spoken to, actually probably since early November 2020. I've spoken to roughly one-on-one between probably 300 to 400 people, maybe more because there's, social media and other outlets, but I wanted to take that time to really be thoughtful about this decision. It's not just about myself, it's my wife, it's my kids, but it's also the community too. This isn't running for city council to me, and speaking solely for myself, is not a popularity contest. This is really about who Lowell is today and what is she going to look like a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And so whoever is going to make that decision to run, I would hope, has put a lot of thought into it. I was raised to not just say whatever you want to hear, but say what you need to hear. And so the last 4 to 5 months of individual conversations, coming up with the platform, thinking about how I'm going to communicate that message in a way that's clear and impactful. I wanted to do that, and I think it would serve this. I think it would serve the community well if all people did that.
When you talk about the message, what issues are going to be central to you? And obviously, folks who know you as an activist. You've been very vocal about diversity issues in the city, inclusion, etc. And we've had long discussions about that. But when you were making those calls to people, I was one of those people, and we chatted for probably about a half hour. And we didn't talk about that. We actually talked about economic development.
100%, right.
So I know you want to speak a little bit to the diversity issues in the city and in equity and inclusion. But I also want to spend some time to focus, because I think a lot of folks know you on that. I want to focus a lot on the other things that are important to you as well. So what will be the central themes of you? Like, have you already thought out, if you're fortunate enough to get elected, what kind of your first motions will be, or the first areas of emphasis that you're going to work on?
So I'm looking forward for people to seeing the motions next year. That's a good teaser.
So you've already got them thought out.
Yes. No, but in all seriousness, I think that this year, to encapsulate the theme, we're going to be dealing with representation, clearly. We're going to be dealing with the health and wellness of the community. And that's going to cut across a lot of different areas. Health and wellness isn't just, public health. It's economic development, the health. It's education. It's workforce. It's beautification. It's neighborhood integrity. It's all of those things. The health of our city, as well as the outlook, both how residents perceive the city and outside of the city as well. So when I say health and wellness, it's kind of all of those things. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to go too in the weeds, but I'll touch upon some of that. And then lastly, I think it's also going to be having the right team to deal with all of those things, because a lot of the conversations tend to be on individual counselors. I have a relationship with this or that counselor, and that's important. And we don't want to take away from those relationships. We don't want to subtract. We want to add. And I think with us going from 9 to 11, voters are going to have a much more critical decision in terms of who do they want their team to be to deal with a whole host of issues, not just within the city, but also the perception of outside the city as well. So that's kind of like the three areas: the representation, which we're going through those conversations almost daily, health and wellness, and then having the right team.
You've been seen as somewhat of a controversial figure. Anybody who talks about change as often and as deep as you have, that happens to them in politics. If elected, how will you kind of seek to build those bridges because you're probably going to have people that you disagree with on a whole host of issues over the course of a term. How do you work with them, and how would you encourage them to work with you on coming together and ultimately doing what I believe all of you who put your name on the ballot want to do, and that's to make this city a better place?
Right. So for those that don't know me, I've been in Lowell for 20 years. I actually got here in 2001 as a transfer student to UMass Lowell. And I ultimately graduated in 2004 with a degree in political science and history. I didn't know in 2004 I was going to do this. That wasn't the goal in 2004. But when I graduated, from 2004 through 2017, I have been in the recruiting and human resources field in different organizations, some in Boston, corporate, but I've also done workforce development work, career coaching, HR for some local area nonprofits as well. And through all of those experiences, I've picked up a number of things along the way. With respect to your question around how do we work well together, how do we build a team, first and foremost, people don't want to hear, people want to be told the truth. And the truth is going to sting sometimes. But I think throughout those conversations, which have to be continuous and which have to be ongoing, Rome wasn't built in a day. We have to do it in a way that's going to leave people's self-respect intact at the end. If I can have a conversation with you about an issue, whether it's workforce housing or whether it's neighborhood interconnectedness, now that we're moving into a new system, how do we get people from Pawtucketville to come downtown, or how do we get people from downtown to go to South Lowell? All of those kind of macro themes. We might have a debate about things because your lived experiences, which are your personal experiences, your professional experiences, some of it may be cultural. All of those are baked in, and we have to do a better job of putting ourselves in other people's shoes. And I think that that's the biggest thing that we face both nationally and locally is empathy and saying, let's take a step back. I don't get this. This is not who I am. This is not where I came from. I've never come across these things. But you're telling me, a lot of people are telling me, and I believe you, and I want to keep learning. So it's just continuous learning and continuous conversations. I wrote a piece back in 2018, around the time that we were about to select a new police chief. And it was around building a stronger relationship with the police chief, but also a stronger relationship with our police department. And in that story, or op-ed, I broke down from research relationship is three parts. It's trust, it's value, and it's dialogue. You got to have those three parts in order to have a strong relationship. Now, if you don't talk, if you don't dialogue often, you don't have a relationship. If you don't trust someone, you definitely don't have a relationship. And if you don't value that person's time, if you don't take the time to really put yourself in that person's shoes, you don't have a relationship. And so all of the different things that we're seeing, whether it's in 2018 to 2019, 2020, 2021, are all centered around people. They're all centered around how do we play together? How do we do business better together? And so as an HR person, as a recruiter who has been doing this for a very long time and actually has a business in this, I consider myself a subject matter expert in this area. I think that now is the right time to have someone who looks at these kind of systems in that way. And I think now is the right time for that. And so that was part of the reason, in addition to those conversations, that pushed me to throw my hat in the ring.
It's 8:31 here on 980 WCAP, chatting with Bobby Tubielli, candidate for Lowell City Council, running citywide here, at large, however you want to describe it. The city, under its new format, will have 3 councilors representing it at large, as opposed to the 9 or all of them in the current system. Let's talk about economic development. That was the focus of our last conversation. You've got some ideas for improving the economic climate in the city. How would you rate it? Do you believe that the city has done a good job on the economic development front? Is it lacking? If it is lacking, where is it lacking? And what types of ideas do you think should be looked at to improve the economic climate?
So first off, hats off to the city manager to do this during a pandemic. It's hard. Well, the city manager and her team, the economic development team, anyone who's doing this work with minimal resources and probably not a big budget. And so what I've been noticing is that there's a lot of constituent services work being done to the existing small business base footprint to just keep them at bay. Do you need a grant? What kind of maintenance work do you need? Just making sure that the communication lines are open. And it was actually very pleasing to see so many different small businesses receiving $2,000 here, $3,000 here, $5,000 there. Now, you and I talked about this as well last year when we both had to apply for PPP funding, right? And I also went through that process, and it was not easy. The paperwork, the waiting. March of last year was very difficult for me in my business. Thankfully, it picked up towards the end of the year, but you magnify that times the thousands of small businesses that we have in this city, and everybody felt the crunch. So, to not belabor the point, I think that the city is doing the best that it can, considering the circumstances that it is in. I will say, not just talking about the problems, but being more solution-oriented, I think we need to look at opportunities as well. And what is this climate going to look like, 3 months from now, as folks are getting more vaccines, and the community starts opening up more and more, how confident are people going to feel about the integrity of the business district or the neighborhoods? And so I'm really focused on those kinds of things as well.
You talked about you're a downtown resident, so you've talked about trying to get more folks from Lowell into the downtown,
100%.
not relying on just the special events, which do their part. But we're a city of 120,000 people. Not that many of them live in downtown comparatively.
Yep.
If we can just get people from downtown, you don't want to forget about the neighborhood business districts, because those are important. But, if they support your downtown, you'd have a much more vibrant downtown.
I'll tell you, this is a true, honest to God story. So my in-laws, they Alexandra's parents, they live in Auburn now, and her father's a retired firefighter, and her mom's a retired former teacher from Worcester Public Schools. They actually come to Lowell to do their grocery shopping. They go to Sophia's to get their yogurt.
Little Greek market on Market
They
Street.
go to Sophia's to get their yogurt, and they go to Olympos Bakery to get their spinach pies.
They're 2 for 2 so far, by the way.
Yeah. And we introduced them to.
We're going right to the Greeks.
And I know. And they go to a Lao Thai kitchen for their boat noodle soup. So Lowell, outside of the city, and yes, we've had Phantom Gourmet here, we've had Andrew Zimmerman here. Lowell is known outside of the city as a real place for cuisine, and so I would love to see more marketing around those assets, because people are traveling. My in-laws are traveling 45 minutes to come to Lowell. I was having dinner about 2 weeks ago at ramen bar, and I was talking to a gentleman right across the seat from me, and he came from Andover to, as you would say, well, Andover. He came from Andover, and he goes there probably 2 or 3 times a month. And I actually asked him, well, why do you come? You know what he said? He said, Main Street in Andover is just, it's, Italian restaurants, and it gets boring after a while. But in Lowell, there's real diversity here. And so I thanked him for coming. I said, keep coming. And so there's real opportunity, I think, with the businesses that we have here, the restaurants that we have here, to attract folks from outside the city, but also across the bridge as well. And we need that. We need stronger interconnectedness between the neighborhoods.
Let's talk about Amazon. There was a motion on the city council agenda a couple of weeks ago, or actually probably a month or so ago now, by Councilor Drinkwater, kind of looking at the potential of an Amazon opening up. It's not a far-flung possibility. Amazon is opening up everywhere. There's battles going on in Hudson. There are other local regional centers that they're opening up. There's a possibility that at some point Amazon could look at Lowell and say, yeah, we want to open up some type of distribution center here. How would you kind of receive that? Would you welcome them with open arms? Would you be open to the idea, depending on location, certain conditions? Or is that a non-starter in your book, having a company like Amazon be part of your economic growth?
Sure. So I'm going to take a step back for a little bit. I think the word that comes to my mind is value proposition. And I think the question that we need to answer as a city is, what is our value proposition? What do we do best? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are the opportunities? What are the threats? Do that kind of analysis, and come up with some goals, some statements, and stick to them. There's certain things we don't do well in, and that's okay, because not everyone is perfect. Lowell is not a perfect municipality, but there's some things that we do really, really well. And I think that we need to communicate that which we do well as consistently and as proudly as possible. And so from an economic development perspective, it could be Amazon today. It could be
There was talk about Google a few years ago.
2 years from now. Name the business. And so I am not, in the business of doing a one size fit. Of doing a let's do this for this business. Let's do this for another business. I think we need to have a strategy, a Lowell strategy, and apply that across the board. And if we need to tweak it a little bit per company, then we can do that. But I think the elephant in the room here is making sure that whatever company is coming to Lowell, that we're putting workers first. We're not just doing livable wages. We want it to be thriving wages as well. A lot of what I've been talking about with folks individually, and I guess now officially on the campaign trail, is upward mobility. And when I used to work at CTI, back in 2009. And this was a year after Obama got into office, and he passed the stimulus. Remember the ARA funding? ARA, American Recovery Reinvestment Act. And a lot of community-based organizations received millions of dollars to do workforce development work. And so CTI, like other CBOs, created this comprehensive integrated employment services program. And I was hired to oversee the career services aspect of that program, and a counterpart on the case management side was hired. And so I was providing job development, career coaching, as well as employer services to people who were receiving public assistance, fuel assistance, mental health issues, drug addiction. I mean, the people across the board. I mean, and at the end of the day, these people needed to be told, you can do it. Yes, you fell down, but you can get back up. We did classes, 3 months, 4 months. They got a certificate, and we got them jobs. And so I would love Amazon to come to Lowell. I would love Google to come to Lowell. I would love any company to come to Lowell. And the conversation that I would have with them, if let's say I was the chair of the Economics Development Subcommittee, right? The conversation that I would be having with these companies in concert with the economic development team is, we have a robust talent pipeline in this city. Whether they are graduating from the Voc, whether they're graduating from Lowell High or MCC or UMass Lowell, they're here. They're not going anywhere. Or rather, they're here. Let's not give them reasons to go anywhere. And so I'm taking a Lowell approach. I'm not taking an Amazon approach. I think we need to really dig our heels in on what we do best and communicate that widely and consistently and proudly.
Lastly,
I hope that answers your question.
Somewhat, you could see yourself potentially saying no to a company like Amazon if it doesn't meet certain conditions. Is that accurate?
I think it's good business. You know, you have to know what your business agenda and strategies are, and you know, if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. But if it does, it does.
Right. Public safety. A lot of focus on police naturally over the last year. Fire has become kind of a hot point over the last several months. A couple of fatal fires in the city, some issues with staffing and rolling brownouts, which I guess have been going on for a bit, but they've really come into focus with those fatal fires. Is this, as best you can tell, is this just an issue of COVID and the required quarantining and that stuff? Or is there a bigger problem with a fire department staffing and or scheduling that's really at the root of this, and that we just might find out in the post-COVID world, we still have these rolling brownouts?
So, couple things. Just from the research that I've been able to do thus far, and I would love to sit down with Chief Sharon. Chief Sharon, if I'm mispronouncing your name, I apologize. But I would love to sit down with him and dig deeper into what's going on, because there are things that are reported, and then there may be things that are unreported, to help us get a better picture. So I'm not in the business of just saying things to say things. I really want to be educated, and I'm here to listen and learn in that process. But from what I've picked up, you know, everyone is talking about funding. And so there's pre-pandemic Lowell, right? And then there's current pandemic and post-pandemic. So there are kind of three parts to this. What did we look like pre-pandemic? And for what I've been seeing, we've been experiencing brownouts for decades, all right? For decades. So this is not a new phenomenon. And I don't think we should be approaching this in a manner that this just happened out the blue. And so if this has been happening for quite some time, then why haven't those investments been made? I don't want to derail, but just real quickly, it'll make sense in a couple seconds. So I live in a condo, right? We're in a process right now of redoing our roof. And the word that we hate is assessment. Is assessments. Who wants a special assessment? But if over the last 10 to 15 years, we did incremental increases in our condo fees, it would have been painful each year, 3% here, 4% here, 5% here, but we would have understood that that was for a greater goal, and as opposed to a $30,000 sticker tag 10 years later. So all this to be said that when we're talking about investments, we have to make sure that we're doing it incrementally. It's an investment. I mean, investments, you spend money to make money. That's what they say, right? It's going to be painful. And I think sometimes when we're looking at these situations, some people would say the can was kicked down the road or it wasn't paid attention to. So I would be an advocate for funding, but also incremental assessments on the budget, just to make sure that we're not finding ourselves in more situations down the road. The other part is data. We got to look at the data too. And then I've had this conversation with my father-in-law, retired firefighter. And one of the things that he told me was around inspections and enforcing codes. And sometimes you go into buildings and the sprinklers aren't working or the sprinklers aren't there. So that needs to be done too. It's not just a funding thing. It has to be a holistic view of the situation. So yes, we want to fund. Yes, we want to make sure that they have the tools to be successful, but we also need to look at the data, and we also need to look at the integrity of the buildings around sprinklers and other things as well to mitigate those fires that happen.
All right, Bobby Tubielli, candidate for Lowell City Council, running citywide. I've seen you've already established the social media accoutrements that go with a 2021 campaign. I assume the website there. By the way, the color scheme, the pretty sharp, blue and yellow, and it originally reminded me of the Los Angeles Rams and Los Angeles Chargers colors, but then I saw the Red Sox uniforms this week, and I said, did Bobby have a sneak peek? the Boston Strong colors.
Thank you. And our motto is a bridge forward. And bridges are places bridges connect Lowell, clearly. And they are a place for connections. Join me, Teddy, Alex, whoever. I don't care if you've been in Lowell for 20 years like I've been, or you've been here for 20 days or 200 years. I think we're running a multicultural, we're running a multi-generational campaign, and I want as many people to join us on this bridge to really face all of these conversations we're having. Let's face them together. They are going to be difficult and they are going to be challenging, but I think I'm the right person at this time to kind of usher through that change.
And the web address is?
www.bobbyforlowell.com, and that's FOR Lowell. And I'm also on Instagram, Bobby for Lowell, Twitter, Bobby for Lowell, and Facebook, Bobby for Lowell.
Look for Bobby for Lowell. And you actually spell out the word FOR instead of putting the number, which became all the rage.
Yeah, and if I could, do I have time to share one more thing or no?
Go.
So we didn't talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I will say this. It's good for our moral fabric, but it's also good for economic development as well. We didn't talk about housing. We need to make sure that we're pushing people to get equity, to build wealth, generational wealth. And part of that is going to be moving towards owning a home. In 2009, my wife and I purchased our first home because then President Obama said, if you purchase your first home, you're going to get $8,000. We ran for that. And some of the money that we were able to save from getting married, and we put it to the $8,000. And then, 12 years later, we're sitting on a little bit of equity. And so for a place like Lowell that has different income brackets, but definitely a lot of folks who are under the federal poverty income levels, we need to be thinking about them too. We need to be having conversations about generational wealth for them too. And if it's about acquiring a first-time home buyer, getting them into a first-time home buyer program, assisting them with closing costs, down payment assistance programs, like other municipalities are doing it, funding those kind of programs, I'm all for it. We're having conversations right now about this stimulus money coming into the city. I would love investment into the downtown area. I think we can beautify the downtown area. I think we can make it respectable, clean it up, some low-hanging fruit stuff, but also some macro issues as well that I can talk for days about because I love this. But I appreciate the time that you've given me.
All right, you've got another 5 months or so to talk about it, and we will get more in depth. There will be a bunch of candidates forums as well. Thank you for stopping on in today. Bobby Tubielli, candidate for Lowell City Council.
Thank you, everyone.